Hey everybody, it's Lon.TV, and a couple of weeks ago we reviewed the ioSafe 220 Plus network attached storage device. This incorporates the guts of a Synology NAS, but builds those guts inside of a fireproof and waterproof enclosure. This thing feels like a safe. It weighs about 30 pounds, and it incorporates this endothermic material that will convert into steam when it gets too hot. And that steam draws heat away from the center core here where the drives are located. Additionally, this is waterproof, so when the fire department comes to put the fire out, it will not have any water intrusion from that activity, and in fact, it can survive being submerged for a number of days before you have anything to worry about on your data. Now, when I reviewed this thing, I mentioned I was trying to arrange for this to get lit up and see if it actually lives up to the claims. And I was able to work out something with the local volunteer fire department here, the Essex Fire Engine Company #1. And what they've let me do is bring this to a training exercise where they're going to be setting a fire and then putting the fire out like they would if they had a fire out in the field. And we're going to see whether or not this thing can survive it. Now, what's going to happen here is that the electronics of this device will be sacrificed in this. And this design here is intended to protect the drives that are inside. So what I'll do here is just open up the drive enclosure so you can see how those drives are protected. And I would also expect, depending on how much heat this experiences, that a lot of the endothermic material that surrounds the drives will have ablated away in the course of being turned into steam. Now inside of here we've got a pair of Ironwolf drives from Seagate, and on these drives I've got a bunch of documents and video files and a whole bunch of other things just to see if we're able to access this data after we pull the drives out following the fire. And what we're going to do with these is put them in another Synology NAS, because the way Synology migration typically works is you take your old drives and put them in the new NAS, and that allows you to pick things up from where you last left off. So this will be a good test of Synology migration after a catastrophic event as well. And what I'm going to do now is put everything back together here and get this ready for its fire. Now, as I double check the screws here on the front, I do want to let you know, in the interest of full disclosure, that this came in free of charge from ioSafe, and Synology is an occasional sponsor here on the channel, but neither is sponsoring this video. All of the opinions you're about to hear are my own, and neither company will be reviewing or approving this before it gets uploaded. So whatever happens, we're going to report on honestly when we get back from the training center. And now that we are tightened up here, I think we are ready to go. So we're going to load this in my car, and we're going to get this thing lit up and see how it survives. Let's head out there. So this is the Essex Fire Department's training center, and in a minute we'll talk to the fire chief about the exercises that they conducted here. But what we did with the NAS was we put it into their burn room where the temperature was the highest. The peak temperature was about 700 degrees, which is about half of what this NAS is rated for in its protection capability. So what we did is we exposed it to 3 different rounds of this fire training where it got up to temperature, the fire was put out with water, and then we moved the NAS to get a different angle exposed and then ran the fire again. The final test, we put the NAS up higher so it would be exposed to more temperature. So we think it got the biggest blast of heat on that 3rd round, about 700 degrees for probably about 15 to 20 minutes. So all in, we got about an hour of fire exposure here on the NAS, along with water coming into the environment to put the fire out. We spoke to the fire chief about what this training is all about.
All right, I'm here with Chief Andy Kressley from the Essex Fire Department. How you doing?
Hey, Lon, how are you?
So what did we just witness here?
Well, we did some live fire training with our burn building. There's a steel building that's we use Class A fire, which is essentially hay bales and pallets, no plastics, no furniture, and we simulate a fire condition. I had temperatures exceeding 780 degrees in the burn room until the crews came in and knocked down the fire, and then the temperature would decrease to 400, which I think is pretty realistic. The burn room can get really hot, but that's actually too hot for our personnel. So we can keep it down to the, below 700. That's good. So the guys actually exited the room when it got hot until the hose line came in.
So they were able to really get a feeling for what it's like in a real fire where you can't see anything. It's extremely hot. And do they have any technology to monitor temperature when they're in a building?
Yes, we do, which is kind of new. We're using our thermal imaging camera, which has on the bottom of the screen, it has a little temperature indicator. You point wherever you point the camera is what the temperature is. So they were taking ceiling temperatures, which again were, 600 to 780 degrees throughout the initial burn parts.
This is an all-volunteer department, as many of them are around in Connecticut. I think the majority of firefighters in the U.S. are volunteers. Can you talk a little bit more about what somebody needs to have credentially to become a firefighter locally?
You really don't need anything to join, and we'll train you on the job. So essentially, we get you through what's called the Firefighter 1 class, entry-level firefighting, and then you get trained in a department, and you can proceed higher to Fire 2 and other qualifications. But essentially, the bottom line is, before you can go in a building, you've got to be Firefighter 1 certified by the state, and then you have to come down here and train with us on our protocol, which basically brings you into our practices as the Essex Fire Department.
And then you also do mutual aid to other towns. So if there's a fire in a neighboring community or even one a little bit further away, you're often called down on that too, right?
That's correct. As manpower issues are, everyone's working. Not everyone can leave work in the middle of the day. So when there's some type of structure fire, there's usually 4 or 5 towns involved coming in and helping put the fire out and overhaul and clean up afterwards.
As a fire chief, you have a day job. So what do you do for a living?
So my day job is I'm an oral and maxillofacial surgeon. So there's times I can leave and there's times I can't.
Right. So if somebody's on the table, you got to somebody else has to come out. And what's funny is you've done every member of my family but me so far. So I've been able to avoid your scalpel and your fire hose. So hopefully it'll stay like that for a while. But really, people that are busy and have jobs, they can still volunteer and help, right?
Absolutely. Not everybody can go all the time. Some people work nights. Some people, we have a few guys who are paid firefighters and they work a 24-hour shift and then they're off for a few days. So they may be around on a given day. They may not be. But people are working all kinds of shifts. So we need people 24/7.
Great. We really appreciate you having us come out today and give this thing a good test. Some parts of it have melted, which is exactly what we were hoping would happen. So we'll take it back and see how it came out.
Perfect. All right. Let me know how it works.
So a big thank you to the Essex Fire Department for allowing us to join them on their training exercise. We stayed in the background. We didn't want to get in the way of anything because it is dangerous work even in a training environment. And they were really good about making sure the NAS was getting enough heat so that we could run this test properly. And again, we got about an hour's worth of fire exposure to this device, and I'm eager to crack it open. Before I do, though, I want to let you know I'm going to be making a contribution to the fire department. Here in Connecticut, volunteer fire companies do get funded by their local municipalities, but they also rely on contributions for equipment and training. And if you'd like to join me, there's a link down below in the video description that you can use. And one fire department actually serves more than just one community because all of our towns help each other whenever there's an emergency. So without further ado, let's get this NAS up on the desk here and see how it did. I was surprised when they pulled it out how good it actually looks, despite how much fire it was exposed to and especially how much temperature it was exposed to. You can see the sticker melted off of here, but this label actually held up pretty good, and it might just be how things were angled. But you get a good sense of the damage here when you look on the back. There used to be a cooling fan there. Now it's a melted blob of plastic. And on the bottom here, all the rubber feet also melted away. But the Ethernet ports here look fairly okay, along with some of the other stuff. But I don't think we're going to be powering this up anytime soon. Linus Tech Tips actually put this in a fire for a shorter duration, and one of their boxes actually looked pretty similar to this one. So the looks can be deceiving here as to how much temperature it got. One thing that I was surprised about is that it took several hours for this to cool off after I brought it home. So I left it outside for a little while to speed that process up, but it was warm probably for about 5 or 6 hours afterward, and that might be due to the nature of its material here. But let's crack open the front here and see what we can do. That screw was definitely in there pretty good. So let's unscrew the front here, and then we'll do the other screw. Now this case is screwed on and it's also held on with a magnet, but we made sure that everything was sealed up super tight before we went out there. And there's the other screw here. And I'll just kind of let this run out in real time here so we can get the reveal. And if we need to, we'll speed up the video a little bit to get through some of these screws coming out. All right, I got the screws out, but this front door is still stuck on. Now, if you remember when we put everything back together, there was a magnet holding it on in addition to the screws. but it feels like it almost like got welded together here. So it is really stuck, and I'm putting a lot of force on it and can't seem to get it moving here. You can hear it cracking as I try to pry it open with this tool, but I don't think this tool is strong enough to get this door off. So, oh, there we go. So now it is opened up here, and you can see what's happened. So this material certainly looks like it's been through some stuff. It almost looks like it melted away a little bit, and that's how it's supposed to work, because there is moisture kind of baked into this stuff, and it's going to turn into steam and draw all of that heat away. So you can see that a good chunk of it here ablated away. You can also see some singe marks over here. Now let's get into the hard drive case here and see how it fared. And we'll unscrew this. And I expect this one to be a little difficult to come out as well. Oh, actually not too bad. So it came out, looks pretty good. And let's take a look at our first hard drive and see what it looks like. So again, the fire was a little cooler perhaps than some of the other tests you might see on YouTube, but we went for a much longer duration. And I think this would more closely replicate what you would experience in a real fire. Another thing to consider is that if you have this device on a second floor or a third floor and you have a catastrophic fire, you may have physical damage of the box actually falling down through the floors as a structure collapses, for example. So you definitely need to think about that too. And that was one worry I had when we had this up on a pallet. Thankfully, the pallet did not ignite, so we were able to get it at a higher level of heat without damaging it. But these hard drives look pretty good. The labels look intact. I don't know if we had any water intrusion. It doesn't seem to be like any water in there, so I think we might be okay there. And let's pull this one out. And this one looks pretty good too. So what I'm going to do next is get these drives unscrewed from here, and then we're going to get the other Synology NAS out and see if this will boot up. Now I've got the drive now detached from the tray that it was in. No moisture that I could see made its way onto it here, and of course the drive here looks pretty much brand new and clean despite what it's been through. But let me get the new NAS here on the table, and let's see if these drives survived. So we're going to put the drives into this DS218 Plus, which in full disclosure, Synology sent to the channel to review a little while back. And I've got now the drives loaded with its drive rails here, and you can see the labels are the same as what we just took out of the other unit. So these are the actual drives that were lit on fire, or at least were inside that drive when it was lit on fire. And I'm just going to slide these in here, and I'll slide the other one in. And now what I'm going to do is apply power to the unit, and I'm going to hit the power button, and let's see if these drives spin up. I'll move my mic over so you can hear them. All right, the first drive is spun up. Here comes the second one. So they're both sounding pretty good, but let's see how well they're actually working and whether or not our data survived. Let me get this thing booted up and we'll look at the migration process. All right, you're going to notice here that we have a status light blinking, and that's because this Synology NAS has not been set up with these drives. So if we jump over to its web control panel, you can see that it has noticed that these drives came from a 220 Plus, and now we're going to move them to a 218 Plus. And I can click on Migrate here to start that process. And I want to migrate and keep everything where it was before, so we're going to select that. And we do have to install the latest DSM for that to happen, so let's let the DSM install here, and when it's done, we'll pick it up from where we left off and see if our data survived. All right, so it updated and rebooted, and now if we go back to its web control panel, it actually has the ioSafe logo up here because these drives were pulled from that burned out NAS device here. So let's go in with our admin username here and our password that we set up. And it looks like everything is right where we left it. Let's take a look at the file station here and see if my videos and documents are still there. They are. We'll try playing some of these back in a second. But before we go too much further, I did want to jump into the disk storage manager here and just see if we can do a quick health check of these drives. So if I go over to drive 1 here, so far it looks like it is being detected as healthy. But let's dive in a little deeper here, because these are Ironwolf drives from Seagate, and on Synology NAS devices you have Ironwolf Health Management that you can run on them. Now, I ran this before the fire, so let's run it again now and see if this drive has had anything detectable occur to it since all of the trauma that it's been through. But as you can see here, at least with that Ironwolf test, it came back normal here as well. Let's do the same thing on the second drive here. We'll go to Health Info, go back to the Ironwolf Health thing here and hit the Start button, and we'll let that run. And it looks like we'll probably get the same result on this second drive. And yep, it looks like it's still coming back normal. One thing that ioSafe recommends is that if you have a fire and you purchase the device with their data protection, they suggest that you send the entire thing back to them for data recovery. And I would probably advise you, after having survived a fire, not to keep continuing to use the same drives. So I would get everything backed up and transitioned over to a fresh set of drives that did not have the trauma that these likely went through. But so far, so good. Now, I also ran some smart tests, which you can do within the Synology interface here. Drive 2 came back perfectly fine, and I'm just wrapping up the test on Drive 1 now. You can see it's at 90% of that quick smart test, and it has come back with a clean bill of health as well. But again, I would get this data copied off or start bringing in new drives to get that data mirrored over as soon as possible. Let's take a look now and see if these videos play and these documents can be read. All right, let's take a look at these Word documents first here and see if they all survived. And it looks like they're all reading back here just fine from these hard drives on the new NAS. Let me go take a look at some videos here that we also have on here. These are from my YouTube channel, so these seem to be working fine too, all in 4K no less. So let's go skip through a few others here. Here's our interview with the antenna man that we did a little while back. Here's my trip to NASA. So all these videos here do seem to be working just fine, and I seem to have the same wardrobe on in each of those videos here, but here you go. The videos are fine. I can scrub back and forth between them here. I can pull up one here at the bottom and see how this one came out, and there you go. Things seem to be looking and playing back just fine here, even though these drives survived the fire. So there you go. We survived not one, but 3 fires and the water that it took to put those fires out. If you're curious as to what this looked like before all of this pain, you can see this shot from earlier in the video. There's definitely a bigger gap here on the material in the middle, and it's designed to ablate away like this as it converts to steam, and that keeps the center core here cool. And of course, we did this over the course of an hour or so. So this thing got exposed to a lot more heat than I've seen on some other videos that tested the fire worthiness of this device. Linus Tech Tips did a great video a couple of years back where they put one of these in a fire for about 20 minutes or so. That one got more heat, but over a shorter duration. We got slightly less heat over a longer duration with, of course, a lot more water exposure. So I think between all the videos that you can find burn testing this thing, we've got a pretty good idea as to how this will perform under most conditions. The test that we ran, I think, is probably more likely a scenario where this thing might be sitting in an equipment closet somewhere. The source of ignition is not likely going to be in the closet with it. The fire is likely going to be around it. So that radiant heat is probably going to be more of what you'll experience versus a direct flame. And of course, you saw what happened to that fan on the back to give you an indicator as to how hot it was and what plastic might turn into under those kinds of conditions. So a normal NAS certainly would not have been able to withstand the heat that this thing put up with here. But all in, it looks pretty good here. I want to thank the Essex Fire Department again for allowing us to tag along on their training exercise. And if you're interested, definitely toss them a couple of bucks as a thank you, because it was great that they allowed us to stop by for their exercise, and it was great to see them in action. And if you're interested in becoming a firefighter, definitely get in touch with your local volunteer fire department, because they're always looking for people to help out. That's going to do it for now. Until next time, this is Lon.TV. Thanks for watching.
This channel is brought to you by the Lon.TV supporters, including gold level supporters Chris Allegretta, Brian Parker, Hot Sauce and Video Games, Baby Metal Fox God, Tom Albrecht, Amda Brown, Matt Zagaya, and Tech Time with Eric. If you want to help the channel, you can by contributing as little as $1 a month. Head over to Lon.TV/support to learn more. And don't forget to subscribe. Visit Lon.TV/S.